Good afternoon and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look at the stories that make our community tick. And class is in session. Today we have one of New Haven's great teachers who's getting a lot of recognition after 3 decades of working in the trenches. Say good morning, good afternoon to Trudy Anderson, a teacher of Spanish, grades 6 through 8 at Nathan Hale School. Ms. Anderson, so nice to see you. And I'm going to ask you to get so close to that microphone you can almost touch it.
Okay.
There you go. Perfect. You always ask your kids to speak up, right?
Yes.
Actually, do you?
All the time.
Okay. Yeah, like real close to the mic. So do they call you Ms. Anderson, Miss Anderson, or just teacher? Or Miss?
They say Miss a lot.
Yeah, because my daughter's a teacher. And she says she gets Miss. Yeah. How do you like that? Because we didn't do that in our day, right?
I think it's new over the past year or two. Because before it used to be Mrs. Anderson, but most of the time now it's Miss.
Okay. Well, you are the recipient. You've just been named Teacher of the Year by the Northeast Conference on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. That sounds like a really big deal. And again, I'm going to ask you to get even closer to the mic.
Okay.
So how did you feel winning this award? When did you hear about it?
I heard about it actually before they announced it. I was very surprised and I was very humbled. But it was a really good feeling. And
how does it come about that someone wins something like that? Did you have to enter some kind of application or give a video of yourself teaching?
So last May, I think, I was named Connecticut World Language Teacher of the Year. And if you win your state, then you get sent to the regional conferences. And for this section, I didn't have to videotape my classes, but I had to show evidence of things that I was doing in my classes. And there are several things, papers that you had to write, reflections on the work that you were doing. And you had to go through an interview process also. And you had to be nominated by a colleague, your supervisor, and a student. Now,
parts of it sound like the tables were turned. People aren't handling work to you. They don't have to be nervous about answering the questions. You have to. What did that feel like to have the tables turned?
Well, it's kind of hard not being the person totally in control of the event. But I had gone through the interview process with Connecticut already, so it wasn't something that I was completely unfamiliar with.
Mm-hmm. So, Ms. Anderson, I wanted to ask you, and what do you like to be called? Do you like about Trudy, Ms. Anderson? I won't call you
fine.
Miss. I won't call you Miss.
Trudy's fine.
Miss always, isn't that also always in conjunction with a request? Isn't like Miss, can I go to the bathroom, Miss? Can I,
it's
someone's
Miss
picking
for
on
anything,
me?
For everything.
So one thing I'm very interested in is your approach as a teacher, how one becomes a Teacher of the Year. Obviously, you've been doing this almost 30 years, right?
Yep.
And always Spanish?
I taught French for about 10 years, but the last 10 years, it's only been Spanish.
And over you all, it's been how many years?
How many what?
How many years you've been teaching?
This is my 30th year.
Whoa, so did you have 10 years where you did both?
Maybe more than 10 years that I did both, yeah.
So I guess the languages are pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still different languages.
Yep.
I always thought Spanish made a little more sense to an English speaker, even though the Spanish and French have more in common than they do to English.
They're very close. When people always say, I think Spanish is easier, I don't really think so. I think they're so similar.
I just thought there were more exceptions with French. Am I wrong about that?
I don't think so.
And you're fluent in both, obviously.
Well, I don't think I'm as fluent in French anymore because I rarely get to use it anymore.
Was there a point at which your dreams changed? Did you used to dream in French and then start dreaming in Spanish?
No, I think especially since I moved to this country and was using Spanish more, I think I think more in Spanish. And I always laugh to my husband that sometimes I'm thinking of saying something and it comes to my brain in Spanish and not in English, even though I'm a native speaker, because I say it so often.
What language you grew up speaking?
English.
Where'd you grow up?
From Jamaica.
Jamaica?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And did you speak any other languages there?
No. Well, we have our Jamaican patois.
Patois. Yeah. And how old are you when you came here?
I moved here when I was 15.
To where?
I moved to Bridgeport.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And what brought you over here?
My parents wanted to move, and so, the sponsorship program, we got sponsored by one of my father's sisters, and they thought it was going to be a better opportunity for us, so they moved.
Did you like Bridgeport?
Yeah, it was fine.
Bridgeport's this big mystery to me, even though I've been here since the 70s, and I've been to Bridgeport. It just seems like almost a different planet from New Haven, doesn't it?
Well, I think New Haven has more neighborhoody type things to do, and I think there in some cases there are more things to do in New Haven. But I think Bridgeport is making a comeback where that's concerned.
But also, you never really know about a place till you live there, right?
Yeah.
Because my guess is from knowing people there, there's just as much community.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you don't hear about it the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
When did you start speaking Spanish and or French?
So I started it in my high school. So I started it when I was 11. So in Jamaica, you go to high school earlier than you do here. And I started when I was 11 learning both languages.
Both. And now why both?
Mm-hmm. Because in our school, you had to take both.
Now, that's interesting because is it true that in America we put less of an emphasis on learning other languages because English is kind of dominant and we kind of feel like we don't need to learn? Because it seems like we've gotten less and less, unless there's some kind of crotchety old person speaking here, we've gotten less fluent in other languages than the rest of the world and maybe than we used to be.
I'm not sure if I completely agree with that. I think one of the issues is that with English, it's so widespread over the entire world. It's the one of the main languages on the internet. You know, so many people want to learn English, so it's so easy for people who live in this country not to feel like they have to learn another language. But I think, especially with our students nowadays, they're really interested in learning another language because their friends might be multicultural. They're playing video games with kids online who speak another language. They want to travel. So I think it's something that students nowadays are pretty interested in doing.
Of course, the fastest growing group in our state is Spanish speakers.
Mm-hmm. But in addition, New Haven, in our school system, we have, I think, 7 different languages, and there are students all in all of those languages who are really interested in wanting to know about it.
What do we learn by learning a language in addition to the words? Do we learn more about other people, other cultures? Do we broaden ourselves as human beings, or is that just kind of...
I think we do broaden ourselves as human beings. So at the beginning of the school year, especially with my Spanish 1A students, I usually have different quotes that they could talk about and, tell me what they think they mean. And one of them is saying when you speak a second language, it's almost like you live 2 lives because you can enjoy another culture. You could, besides the language, the culture, learning how to think differently and being more open-minded to other possibilities and being willing to take risks.
Did the students say that, or they got that from you?
I let them figure it out first. Then we discuss it afterwards.
And the student said that?
Yeah, so that's the general quote. And then I say, well, what do you think that quote means? And there's several of them about learning languages. And then they get to talk about what that would mean for them.
And how's that happened in your life?
Well, so I grew up in Jamaica where I never thought I was going to move here to live, even though I moved here when I was 15, so I wasn't that old. And I've seen in my own life where I've gotten the amazing opportunity to travel into so many different countries and to communicate with the people who are there. I've met so many different types of people here in the United States, and I'm not afraid to experience somebody else's culture. I'm not afraid to think differently. I think, learning another language kind of makes you a braver person.
One view of God, my view of God, comes from Martin Buber, which is the connection of one person to another. We see the I and thou. And I guess language is sort of a key that unlocks the barrier between those two. Well, we're talking to Trudy Anderson. We're not calling her Miss. We're calling her Trudy Anderson, who is the teacher of the year for the whole Northeast in the teaching of foreign languages. She teaches 6 through 8 at Nathan Hale School. She teaches Spanish. She used to teach French as well. So Trudy, when this was announced, they talked about some aspects of your approach, what makes you a special kind of teacher. One thing is your approach is small group stations, so the kids can learn at their own skill. That seems like a trick. How many kids? I don't mean like a bad trick. I mean like a challenge. How many kids are in your classroom?
So the limit in New Haven is 27. So my smallest class could be right now is 6, and my largest is over 20. And so it's a really good chance for students to work independently and to show what they know. And
so how do you arrange that? You're in front of the class, the bell rings, and you have 20 kids, 25 kids. What do you do with them so that they can learn in smaller groups and independently?
So if you're speaking specifically about doing stations, there's a lot of planning ahead of time that a teacher has to do. I have to create the materials, find the resources that I want them to use, because in general, we're using authentic resources and not a textbook. In fact, we're not using textbooks anymore for our world language program. Not really. So
What do you use? Do you use like El País? Do you use newspapers? Do you use kids' books?
it could be anything. It could be YouTube interviews. It could be YouTube videos. It could be anything that I'm finding. It could be a newspaper article, a commercial, different writing
So
activities.
you got to get the censors to unblock YouTube in the classroom.
Oh,
right?
it's not blocked. Over the past 2 years, I've been so thankful for YouTube.
Tell me about that.
Being thankful for YouTube because during the pandemic, there were so many things, or the initial part of the pandemic, that we were sent home with 1 day's notice. and
right. And Nathan Hale was the first.
And Nathan
Hale
Hale was the first school
where they
yes.
reported COVID. We didn't even know what to do with it yet.
Yeah.
But that was the day, right? It was a Thursday, when all of a sudden COVID's here and we weren't ready. Like, are you coming back on Friday? Are we going to close other schools?
And it happened on the day that I had taken a personal day that day because my son was home from school for spring break. So I said I wanted to spend a day with him. And so I was home, and my assistant principal called me and said, don't come back. And so I had to learn a lot with technology and how to get materials
Tell
to
me
the
about
students.
YouTube, because I've heard about this elsewhere too, that we hear the bad stuff, but it's amazing how all over the world people are learning how to speak other languages, learning science, all sorts of stuff,
Yes,
university courses.
There's everything's on YouTube. People have learned how to do things, and they're willing to teach other people how to do it. The only way I made it through all the technology stuff was watching videos on YouTube to tell me how to do all the technology
so it wasn't YouTube you had to show the kids. It was teaching you how to use technology.
How to
so
do
what
that.
kind of tech did you learn on that?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, give me an
Anything.
example, something you wouldn't know how to do without YouTube.
How to make, before we got the different programs, to make a worksheet or something editable that the kids could write on it and give it back to me.
Oh, okay.
So there were ways to learn how to do it on Google Slides so that the students could edit it and write on a worksheet or write on something that I gave them. But later on in the school year, we did get other programs that were so much easier. But there's so many things that I just didn't know how to do because I never had to. And I had to go to YouTube to learn how to do it and to find the resources to send to the students to do the activities.
And were there
that I
actual
wanted to do.
videos that you used as teaching tools and you continue to in the classroom? What would be an
of
example?
course.
Tell me about one.
So, let's see, something that I've used recently. So, in one of my lessons, and this is one of the things I shared with the teacher of the year, we were talking about your home and your daily routine. And the topic was, I tried to make it come outside of the classroom to ask them, well, what would you do if water was not easily accessible to you?
This is
how would
realistic
your life
for a lot of people in the world.
Yes. How would your life be very different? And so I actually showed them a video from a young woman in Somalia. So I don't have to use things in Spanish because I just showed them the video. I wasn't showing them the words. They weren't listening to the words. They just wanted the video. And they saw how, 6 hours of her life at least every day is spent getting water. So then we talked about, well, what do you do if you can't get enough water? And we talked about, then we moved it into the other realm in what can we do to conserve water. Then they did research again online to figure out how to conserve water. Then they ended up making up an infographic or a poster explaining in Spanish how they could conserve water in their own homes or
That
in
is
their
so
community.
cool.
So you can spring from something on YouTube or from an article you read somewhere to make things more real life for the students, so they're hopefully be a little bit more interested.
And I
in what
heard
they're
Spanish at the end there,
doing.
which I love. So it sounds like you're really, and I saw this in your words, you're really teaching about the world and their lives as a way of teaching language rather than a textbook.
Yeah, so we in New Haven with our new supervisor, that's one thing she's been very interested in doing, that we're making the curriculum match what we're doing. And so, for example, we rewrote the level 1 curriculum this year to deal with the community. That's one of the standards in world language. And so we're really spending a lot of time talking to our students about how they can engage with the language in New Haven itself.
Can I have an example with that?
So at the very beginning of the school year, my Spanish 1A kids, so those are the students who just started learning Spanish. So they learned how to introduce themselves. They learned how to ask a few very simple questions to other people. And then our challenge to them was, okay, go to and we gave them a list of businesses and suggestions of and brainstorm places that they could go, and they could go and talk to somebody in there. And we had a piece of paper that says, "Hi, I'm a student at Nathan Hale School, and I just would like to talk to somebody in Spanish or whatever language it was, because it's for all the languages. And please sign it if I ask you questions."
So
and,
where'd they go?
So a lot of them were going to their neighborhood bodega or talking to their friends' parents or whoever they could find. They went to a couple of supermarkets, and they go on their
C-Town.
own. Yeah, they go on their own to wherever they felt
That
comfortable.
sounds fun. Well, I wish I'd had you as a teacher.
But any
I had
teacher,
some good teachers, but this is fun.
but any teacher in New Haven had that.
Who's
for us to do.
who's the new person in charge of that?
Jessica Haxey. She's been here for a few years. I don't know how many years yet, but maybe at least 5, I think. So she's our new supervisor.
How do you spell her last name?
Haxhi
And she's in charge of what?
of World Language Department, and she was the actual past president. She was president of the governing organization for world languages last school year. So she's the immediate past president.
So Trudy, you also brought up the word bravery. You talked about learning language is a brave act. And that, and there you just gave an example of like going out in the world and talking to people and facing them. You're not just doing this theoretically. And in the materials about your award, that word brave came up again. You believe in teaching students to be curious about other peoples and their cultures and bravely investigate other perspectives to prepare them for life in a multicultural, interconnected world. Tell me about that and another specific.
Well, I think this, even simple things like with our students right now, they would never really think about what an interconnected world is. However, even just looking at the things happening in Ukraine and all over the world, students are getting the inkling that what happens in some other part of the world affects them. And they're going out into a world where they're going to have to work with people everywhere. And they're going to have to learn how to navigate somebody else's culture. What would you say? What would you not say? They're going to have to learn how to communicate with other people. And even if they have somebody who translates for them, they still have to be culturally aware that they're working with other people and it's not always their way, that there can be compromise, that they can learn how somebody else works, and that maybe their way might be better than our way, or to be willing to entertain that thought. And I don't think it's going out to meet other people, to work with other people, to interact with people, to be entertained with other people is not necessarily something that's always in our comfort zone.
Right.
So I think it's a brave thing to be willing to try to do that.
So give me an example. Like you gave me an example about going to stores for the first year. By the time I've had Ms. Anderson for the third year, what am I doing to bravely encounter a multicultural world?
So in my classroom, I usually try, besides making the lessons geared towards something that they would meet outside, but almost a month ago, I invited one of my friends to come into my class, to Zoom into my class, and my students we're working in a unit about childhood, and they were able to ask her questions about her childhood and to talk about afterwards what this woman's childhood was like. And for many students, that's a very scary thing to do because they look at me as their teacher. I am a teacher. They speak to me. I'm the teacher who's from Jamaica, who speaks Spanish with a Jamaican accent, but they're used to me speaking in a way to make them understand. So if they don't understand something, I have all these different ways of trying to get them to understand. Every teacher does that. But here they were speaking to, as they call it, a real life Spanish speaking person.
Who was the person? I don't mean name, like what kind of person was it?
She's from Puerto Rico. She's one of my friends. And she was very good about speaking with them, but sometimes they at first didn't quite get what she was saying at first, and I'd paraphrase what she said and they'll say, oh, but the whole fact was that they had to be brave enough. They worked on it ahead of time to make the questions that they wanted to ask her and to listen intently to figure out what she was saying, because it was a different person speaking Spanish to them.
So at first they asked you to translate, or you had to translate?
No, I didn't translate for it. Well, the kids know I don't believe in translation.
Okay.
You say it a different way till they get it, or show them a different way until they get it.
Tell me about that.
Why I don't believe in translation? Because if you ask any world language teacher, they will tell you no, because it doesn't force the child to understand what people are saying or to look for the clues to figure out what somebody is saying. And so in teaching a world language, we have all these different ways of whether it's showing them a picture, an action, using cognates, using all different types of manners, using the context clues to figure things out. So even when my friend would say something and they didn't quite get it, and they might ask her to repeat it, and if she said it again and they didn't quite get it, I might say it again in Spanish in another way using the words that they would understand in order to get it.
So can I have an example of something she said that they didn't understand at first?
Just trying to think back.
And she lives in Puerto Rico?
No, she actually lives in Milford.
Okay.
She's from Puerto Rico. I can't really think of what it was right now, but I just know that there were a few times she said something, they didn't understand it. I said it to them using different words because a native speaker is going to speak how they would normally speak. But with students learning a language, sometimes as a teacher, we know how to put it in simpler words that they would know so that they can understand it.
And also, of course, the Spanish, even in our city where people are from Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Puerto Rico, many other places too, they're different dialects, right?
And different words, which is really interesting. So one of the things that I do when I'm teaching different things, I think we need to honor what people's Spanish is. I don't think we should tell anybody that you have to speak Castilian Spanish.
Right.
I mean, that's the way I learned Castilian Spanish. But I think we should honor what people say in their own culture and just say, well, here's another way to say it. Other people say this.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned quite a bit in our school. There are quite a few students from Ecuador, and just simple like we're learning how to say the word for pen. I think we came up with 4 different ways people say pen, depending on where they are from. So people from Ecuador say esfero. Many people esfero, esfero. Many people from Mexico might say lapicero.
Lapicero.
Lapicero. People from the Caribbean might say pluma.
Puma.
Pluma.
Oh, like plume in French. Plume.
Yeah, plume.
Yep.
And people from Spain might say bolígrafo. And it's the same pen we're talking about. And you just honor that. That's what people say. And
Boligrafo.
Boligrafo.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm getting the honor of being in Ms. Anderson's class today, and it's really a treat. I think your kids are very lucky. So you mentioned you have kids from Ecuador. Where do most of your students come from, or is there no most?
There's no most. Most of the students, well, I'd say quite a few of them are from just right in Morris Grove on the other side.
But even Morris Cove has changed a little bit from Morris Cove before.
It has changed from when it was very heavily Italian when I just started working there, and now there are more and more Latinos living there.
Mm-hmm. And then it's not just one group of Latinos, right? Because I know there's a whole community from Mexico, a whole community from Guatemala, a whole community from Peru. Is it pretty widely varied?
I don't know all the demographics. I'm just going to say from my class, many of the students who are heritage speakers or have their heritage, many of them are from Ecuador. Of course, you have Puerto Rico and Mexico, but there are quite a few from Ecuador.
Well, you remember that time, I guess it was about 12 years ago, 15 years ago, when Danbury pushed out the Ecuadorian families and we embraced them and the embassy came here. Was that around the time you saw it start to change it, Nathan Hale?
I don't know. I just say in the last 5 or so years, I've noticed that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're so lucky to have you, Trudy Anderson, teaching in New Haven. I'm so glad you. And I wish we could talk longer, but you got another class to teach.
Yes,
so we can't be selfish and hold you here. You don't have to hold up your hand and say, "Miss, can I go back to my school?" We're going to let you go. Trudy Anderson, congratulations so much for becoming the Northeast Teacher of the Year in foreign languages. But it's not over.
Nope.
The tables are still turned. You got another competition coming. You're going to represent it in the National Language Teacher of the Year competition November.
Yes.
What is that, and how does one compete?
So if you win the regional I don't even think about contest, but if you get named it from the regional area, then you go to the national, which will be in Boston, and I have to videotape my classes. There's several reflections that I have to do, and it's going to be a lot of work.
Well, we're rooting for you.
Thank you.
But whether or not you win that, you've won our hearts in New Haven.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
So will you, when you go, let me see if I could write, when they ask, are they going to do any live exercises when you're there when you compete? Like, are you going to need either an esfero, a lapicero, a pluma,
Nope.
or a boligrafo?
It's going to be a lot of policy, I think.
Trudy Anderson, Teacher of the Year and Teacher of Every Year in Spanish at Nathan Hale School. Thank you for visiting with us on Dateline New Haven. We're going to take a little break, and then, as Trudy mentioned, we are connected to the rest of the world. We're going to be talking about Ukraine with a Ukraine expert. We're going to take it out for now with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. It's Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night on WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.